reduce the risk of an athlete getting injured, then they're going to be able to train. Their availability for training is going to be as high as possible, which will improve their physical performance on the court. So that's kind of my main areas that I'm trying to work on: reduce injury risk and improve performance. Important to note that players will only improve their badminton skills by training and competing on court that's of high quality. You do find some players kind of when they start their S&C journey might get really into it and love going to the gym, and all of a sudden the gym can become the focus. But the gym is only a very small portion of the performance in badminton, and it's just, I suppose, to always remember that and remind the players of that. Strength and conditioning is a small part. So is their nutrition, their psychology, their physiotherapy, their video analysis. All those things are looking to just support their actual badminton training and their actual performance. So these are the kind of areas that I'm going to chat through now. Okay, so understanding the sport, kind of my approach to that, understanding the player. So how can we learn about the player? What is their school demands, their life home situation, their nutritional demands, things like that. And then how we approach identify the key areas to work on. So first off, looking at the demands of the sport. Okay, so we need to be specific to the discipline. So a lot of you know there's slight differences obviously between the singles, the doubles and the mixed. We look at the subjective analysis of the competition and training environments. So in terms of the feel and the instinct. So I'd often have players coming to me saying that, they're going to Swiss Open next week. That court really doesn't agree with them. They know their knee is going to be sore, their ankles are going to be stiff after that. What can we do ahead of them traveling to that tournament to try and prep them and prep their body for recovering well afterwards and coming back and getting back into training the following week without any issues? They'll often talk about, probably you guys more than me, a court being, or a hall being fast versus slow. So all those kind of elements that come into preparing an athlete for those matches. Looking at the objective data of training and match playing demands, so heart rate. So sometimes we'll have the players where their heart rates, their belts in training, so we can get an idea of what their heart rates are at, what the work to rest ratios look like in training. Is that matching what's happening on the court? The movement profiles that we're working on in the gym to try and make them stronger, does that match up what's happening on court as well? Then we look at what are the physical capacities that underpin performance. So I'll chat through those. And we have kind of typical standards that we kind of look to expect from a player at a given level of performance. And again, some of that's based on research and some of that is based on what's kind of come through from the seniors at the moment. And then again, what are the most common injuries? How often do they occur? Where are they? And how long might it keep a player out for? And what can we do then to stop that kind of happening? So I won't go massively into kind of this kind of detail, but kind of where we start is looking at the different disciplines. Okay, how long does a game last in your men's singles, men's doubles, women's singles, women's doubles, and your mixed doubles? How often are they playing for in that time when they're on the court? How long is an average rally? How long is the average kind of rest time for each discipline? And then just again, looking at kind of what happened maybe in Beijing versus London. Again, this is all based on research. Something that I'd be mostly, for me, interested in and looking at this data would be kind of what is the work to rest ratio? So what does that look like? What energy systems are being used? Where should we focus on for the training? What's happening at the rest point at 11? What can us as the team do for the athlete during that rest time? Is there enough time for them to take on an energy gel? Is there enough time for hydration? What are the focuses there to try and improve performance? What's the rest between the games? So again, you can see there it's almost double for what happens at rest point 11. So kind of just trying to get a graph and an understanding. For me, I, as often as I can, I try and get over to training and sit at training and see what's happening at training, see how players are performing at training, see how they are, what does the demands of training look like? They often will train on a Tuesday morning, for example, on court, a 2-hour session, and then they're into me in the gym in the afternoon. So it's good for me to go over and get a grasp of kind of what does that training session look like before they come into me. They're already going to be in a slightly fatigued state. How can they be recovered well from that? So kind of getting a grasp of kind of okay, the match play demands, but also what are the training demands and do they look like it? So in a very simplistic view, I suppose these are the physical capacities that do underpin performance. So mobility, primarily looking at mobility at the ankle, the hip and the thoracic spine. Strength, for the most part, we're kind of interested in like what's their maximum strength and what is their explosive strength, their power. So again, explosiveness, reactive strength, which I'll check through what reactive strength means. Speed, so we kind of do measure that over 0 to 10 meters. What's their change of direction ability like? Again, we have a test that we use to look at that. And then their anaerobic endurance and their aerobic endurance. So they're kind of all the physical capacities that we look at that which do underpin performance in badminton. One of the biggest ones, I suppose, that underpins an awful lot of what I just spoke about is strength. Okay, so strength has been shown to be related to speed, change of direction. It is a massive quality that really, like, it's the foundation that underpins everything. So yeah, so as I said, okay, it's been correlated to speed, power, plyometric ability, change of direction, and in rugby, it's been shown to be associated with less technical errors in a match. So again, if it's leading into something that's technical, that's badminton, skill specific, possibly that might be the same for badminton. And then a big important one for me is athletes with the higher strength levels are less susceptible to injury. They're less susceptible to injury. They're going to be able to train more. They're going to improve their performance. So it all is interlinked next. So kind of that's one of the key, when athletes start coming into us in the institute, that's one of the key qualities that we like to try and work on first. So I suppose the question that always comes back is, okay, well, how strong is strong enough? Like, how strong do we want these players to be? So again, just some from the research, some of the elite players on the international circuit that have been ranked within the top 10, I think this paper is. Their 1 rep max of back squat will be 2 times their body weight. Their 1 rep max for a bench press in and around 1 times their body weight. And a measure of power, so their counter movement jump height, something like 46 centimeters. That's kind of what you're looking to get for at the top elite end of things. Obviously, when you're starting off with your juniors, we're starting off much lower than that, but that's kind of an idea of where we're trying to get to with the seniors. Some data actually does exist on how strong the junior players are. So if we look, sorry, I'm going to move myself out of the way here. So Chinese junior badminton and table tennis players can deadlift 1.6 times their body weight at 14 years of age. I'm going to let you know that's pretty strong for a 14-year-old, but the data does exist. And then high-level Malaysian badminton players are able to squat 2 times their body weight. So again, in terms of Irish athletes, I'd say we are a bit behind in that kind of data, but it is somewhere that we are trying to move towards and trying to get younger players kind of lifting weights that little bit sooner, that little bit earlier. Not that we're trying to get them up to 2 times their body weight, but that they are confident and competent in the movement, first of all, and then confident to start loading themselves. So that when they do get to kind of those senior ranks, that they are closer to maybe that 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 times body weight at the lower extremity lifts. Youth, so resistance training in youth. So obviously over the last number of years, it's become something that is very topical. And I suppose the main message that I'll always try and push is that it should be done so long as it is coached properly by somebody who is qualified and knows what they're talking about. That initially the focus is always on developing their technique and making sure that that is appropriate first before any sort of loading is done. And that we don't just focus on, you know, the 2 legs on the ground doing a squat or a deadlift, that you also look at challenging their balance, their coordination and the stability. And I suppose the big one for the youth is making it fun and enjoyable so that, you know, they want to come back, they want to be doing it again. So many benefits have been shown for resistance training in youth, reducing injury risk, improving performance and improving their overall health. And I suppose even more important at the moment. I suppose there's more research coming out now, like how important it is for female athletes, even by comparison to young men who are starting off in their resistance training journey. When young boys hit puberty, they, get a testosterone boost and all that. And unfortunately, obviously, the females don't. So girls are a little bit behind when it comes to their resistance training and the benefits that they can get. So if we can start them even earlier again, 12, 13 years of age, get them lifting weights, they're going to be in a much better position when they're getting, they're 16, 17, 18, moving into their senior ranks. And there's a good bit of research coming out now about the impact that could have on their transfer into being a senior athlete. So then we look at injuries and what are the most common ones. The ones most common that I definitely see and we are dealing with the senior athletes are kind of more of your overuse injuries. So it's the patella, so it's the knee joint, so achy knees and Achilles tendon. And that's basically because of the repetitive nature of badminton, a lot of lunging on the same leg all the time. And that eccentric loading, so the lengthening of the muscle tissue that happens at the knee and the ankle joint. So there's one senior athlete in particular that I'm dealing with at the moment who often has knee problems, and we've put a big program in place over the last year to reduce the pain that he's getting in his knee, and it's been very effective. That hasn't, touch wood, piped up yet this year. And then we have another athlete that I'm dealing with who has an ongoing Achilles problem. Something that she probably will be dealing with for another while because we can't really get the rest in that's needed in what is a chaotic Olympic cycle, but totally manageable in what we see. And then other areas that like we see a lot of kind of issues kind of popping up in, shoulders. We've never had anybody with a major shoulder injury, but just tightness, maybe their neck getting tight, shoulder getting tight, wrist problems. So again, a bit of repetitive overuse of the wrist, hip pain. Often that kind of comes from somebody maybe jarring their hip slightly or falling kind of funny on court. Haven't really had any acute ankle sprains of recent, touch wood again, but we do see them the odd time. But I suppose in the institute where we see the biggest time loss is where somebody gets sick, they pick up a cold, a chest infection, and then they come back to training and they jump in and the load goes up really high, really quickly, and they pick up a little niggle or an injury. So that's kind of where we actually see most of the injuries occurring, is actually followed by a little illness. So thankfully, there's nothing too traumatic that we'd see. All very manageable. There wouldn't be a whole lot of athletes who have time loss from injuries, thankfully. But things that we could probably manage a little bit better, depending on the calendar that they are attaining to. Then next, we move on to kind of understanding the player. So some of you might be coaching, 14, 15-year-olds. Some of you might be coaching seniors or that, but I suppose these are kind of the main areas that I try and get a handle on each player, that I know what's going on with them. So I suppose, first of all, when they start with me, okay, what's their S&C background? Have they any gym experience? Are they playing another sport? So, your 14-year-old might be involved in Gaelic football. Are they doing S&C with Gaelic football? Right, okay, fine. Let's find out what they're doing there. So let's not double up on gym work that they're doing, and be happy that that's been taken care of. So where are we starting at? I'll always be, if somebody tells me, oh yeah, I have a big background, I've done loads of work, I'll still always start fairly raw with them for that first session, just to see how they move, see how competent they are at their balance and their coordination before I'll progress them on. And the next thing to look at is if there's any current injuries, and then any previous injury history. And if there is a significant injury there, I will always look to ask, can I go back and chat with their physio or get information from their physio about what that injury was? the odd time, you'll start with somebody, any previous injuries? No, 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 absolutely fine. And then you might be 5 or 6 weeks into something and they're talking, oh, my hamstring's really tight, my hamstring's really tight. And oh, well, actually, I actually had a really bad hamstring injury, 6 weeks ago. And you're like, oh, well, right. So that explains things. So making sure you're getting the correct information. The physical, the functional, and performance profile. Again, that's kind of some testing that we'll do, and I'll chat through what the testing looks like in the institute that we do with the seniors. Phase of the year, so where they're at. I'm not sure what that looks like for kind of the more junior players, but I know for the seniors, it's just chaos. We don't really have blocks and blocks of training, but I know from the juniors that it will be coming into the institute, there is phases where we can get big chunks of work done. So they might have 6 weeks where there isn't going to be any competition, or they might have 3 months where they only have 1 to 2 competitions in. So, okay, here's a phase where we can really work on their maximum strength and try and push that quality, and then we'll take a little break, and then we might move on to a different quality, for example. Then next thing I'll look at is, okay, well, what does the competition schedule look like? For the seniors at the moment who are in the Olympic rat race, competition schedule pretty much at the moment is every single week, with the odd week off here or there. Then we've got somebody who's like entering that kind of senior ranking, and they're looking at 1 competition each month. And the juniors, I think, are a little bit less than that, with maybe some national competitions on. So what does that look like for them? What does their workload look like? What does, as in how many badminton sessions are they doing a week? How many S&C sessions are they doing a week? What's their recovery like? So what do they have between sessions? What's the nutrition like between sessions? What's their hydration like? What's their sleep like? All those elements. Then the other practices within badminton. So again, for example, like if I'm doing plyometrics with an athlete in the gym, but they've also been doing a load of plyometrics and jumping on the court that morning, I don't want to be double up and landing them with a whole load of plyometrics. So if I know that they've been doing a big smash session, for example, on a Tuesday morning, I'm not going to bring them in and do a whole load of extra jumping with them on Tuesday afternoon. So chatting with the coaches and the athlete as to what's going on in training. Other activities and lifestyle. So I don't know, your teenagers, do they have a job? Are they working at the weekends? Are they working in the evenings? Are they sitting their junior cert? Are they sitting their leaving cert? What's home life like for them? What stresses do they have there? Those kind of elements to chat through. And then I suppose the aims and outcomes. So again, chatting with the coach and the player, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the overall goal? Like, are we trying to get into the senior ranks? Are we taking our time with these things? Do we want to make you a bit faster? Do we want to make you a bit fitter? What is our key outcome, short term and long term, in terms of goal setting? Something I just thought I'd briefly mention within all of that is kind of early specialization in sport. I suppose at the moment, obviously, we're talking badminton, but just to be aware, like early specialization in any sport is something that wouldn't really be pushed, or something that we should be looking at, because it might actually stifle the long-term development of a player and possibly increase the risk of injury. So loads of research out there to say you're better off exposing them to a wide range of different skills, movements, and environments. And starting with a wide range of activities, and doing S&C at a young age will actually help the development of that player. So I know some of you have 14, 15-year-olds who are excellent badminton players. You want to push, 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 but actually maybe letting them go to Gaelic football on a Tuesday night is possibly going to be best for them long term. It's hard to hear that sometimes as the coach, but just to keep that in mind. Question I often get, like, what is early specialization? I've never really found, a clear definition of what it is, but some of the areas that you'd look at would be like a single sport from a very young age, a high volume of deliberate practice, year-round training, so no time off. They really should be getting 3-4 weeks away from a badminton court at some point in the year, exclusion of other sports and not playing anything else. Everything being very intense and focused on competitions and rankings and results, as opposed to fun and enjoyment and all those things that go with kind of junior sport. It's a good bit of research then, nothing specific to badminton, but just if you have a player who is really successful as a junior, it doesn't actually mean they're going to be successful as a senior. So a couple of research there from different sports. So in athletics, less than 30% of athletes ranked in the top 20 at under 13 were still listed in the top 100 at under 20, and less than 40% at under 15. So it is a big drop off, so let them out, let them play the different sports, let them do the different things they want to do. And if badminton is the one for them, they're going to come back to it. Another example there is swimming. Junior to senior transition rate at elite European level is 21 to 25%. Again, some of that is from burnout of the sport. So some kids who are like, fully in, like training like they're seniors at, young ages, just get sick of it, get burnt out, and just want something different for their lives moving forward. Just something I thought I'd briefly mention in this. It's something probably you could chat about for a long time. And just another sport then, just to say that like people do think that specializing early will actually help you reach elite, but again, as I just mentioned, it's actually not equal to career success. So we've chatted about kind of how we identify the demands of the sport and then looking at the player that you're dealing with. Now how do we move on to kind of identifying the key areas to work on? So this is a document that myself and Johnny, who is the pathway S&C coach in the institute, we worked on this document with the senior coaches, badminton coaches, in the National Centre over the course of a couple of weeks, back and forth. So we had an agreement of what we were kind of working on, and we decided let's keep this document pretty simple. The goals were fairly obvious to everybody involved of what we were trying to work on and improve. So we picked out 3 kind of areas that the coaches said was an important area to work on, and then so they picked optimized smash speed and trajectory, shot specific multi-lunge, and repeated game fitness and repeatability. From there, I suppose me and Johnny went away and were like, okay, let's look at what are the key capacities that we need to work on, and how do we do that for our pathway athletes and our senior athletes, and how do we measure it as an outcome. We try our best to stick to this kind of framework. Obviously, we can't kind of cover everything, and coaches are happy and aware with that, but this is kind of the pathway that we work with. So again, I won't chat through it entirely. You'll be getting these slides so you can flick through it yourselves and have a read through of everything. But if we look at the first one, for example, optimize the smash speed. The key capacities that we said, you need to work on for that are jump height, positional sense, and rotational range of motion and power. So we split that up into, okay, well, how can we do that? What's our way of going about it? For the pathway athletes and the senior athletes, so myself and Johnny said, that's what we can work on, the jump height and the rotational range of motion and power. And hey, coaches, when you're on course, you need to work on foundational positioning and footwork and game intensity positioning and footwork for the senior athletes. And then looking at, okay, well, how do we measure it? How can we see if we're making any improvements in it? And we look at, okay, jump height and the counter movement jump, a change of direction test, which is the 505. Something we haven't done. So again, as I said, we haven't really got everything, but the range of motion assessment of a rotational med ball throw for distance, for example, is something that we spoke about. We could add in to measure our rotational range of motion and power. That's kind of how we worked with the coaches in terms of, okay, what are we trying to work towards? What are we all happy with? And that's how we kind of try and structure our training then and our testing around that. And then I suppose we look at, okay, the same ideas again, but what are the exercises? How do we break that down then for pathway and senior athletes? So again, our same goals, our same key capacities that we're working on, but what does Johnny focus on with the pathway players, and what do I focus on then with the senior players? So again, we'll just look at the first one, for example. Johnny focuses on the anatomical adaptation of a squat pattern. So are they squatting effectively, and are they learning how to produce force maximally? So are they gradually starting to load themselves up? And then I, with the senior players, work a bit more on, okay, the rate of force development, like producing force really rapidly in that squat and with higher loads. The coaches then work on kind of more the technical aspects with the pathway players, and with the senior players, they work with, sorry, more game scenario drills. And then finally, in terms of rotational power, Johnny would work more so on their mobility and the flexibility in their thoracic spine and the stability of their lumbar spine. And then I work more on loading up those patterns, so with med ball throws and things like that. That's kind of how we've broken it down. We will review this again after the Paris cycle with the coaches. We'll sit down with them and see how things have changed and how things have progressed, and if there are any things we want to add in or take out from what we've worked with. But it works really well for me and Johnny to keep ourselves on track in terms of how we go about our programming and what we're trying to work towards. And then I suppose our testing battery, I suppose what it looks like for our athletes at the moment. Again, I'll look for review after Paris, but at the moment, these are the tests that we use for our athletes in the institute. We try and test athletes quarterly. It generally works out to be about 2 to 3 times a year that we get the full squad together for everything. But some of these tests we pick up, it could be a monthly or a bi-weekly basis otherwise. But so we look at counter movement jump, so jumping for maximal height. That's a measure for our lower extremity power. Then we do a yo-yo test with them. So that is looking at their endurance. We test their RSI, so that's like a hopping test. So they do 10 hops in a row, and we're looking about how explosive they are, so how quick they can get off the ground and how high they can jump with that. Again, that's a test that's related to their speed and their change of direction ability. Then we measure their 5 and 10 meter speed, and then we do a change of direction test at 5:05. So that's sprinting at 5 meters, turning around and sprinting back. And then we also include a couple of more tests that I haven't really included in this report here that I'm kind of showing you, but they also do a 3-rep max chin up. So their body weight plus an additional weight, what can they do for 3 reps? We also do a single leg isometric squat, which would be for their lower extremity strength. And then depending on the athlete, we also kind of look at monitoring their calf strength, their hip, ab and adductor strength, some of their knee extension strength for those that might have those niggly knees, and yeah, the 3-rep max also. If you look at the table there, you can probably see kind of we have standards across there for development national and international standards. So again, they're all up for review. Those standards that we have are something that myself and the other S&C coaches sat down and took from whatever researchers out there. We had some data from GB athletes, and then we also had just the data that we've collected from the athletes ourselves. So again, this is kind of, at the moment, we're saying, okay, the development standard is 46.6 for a counter movement jump, and international standard is 54.8. Okay, so it's quite high, but it's something that we're striving to achieve. And the graph at the bottom then is just showing you kind of what that looks like. So the more full the graph is, the closer the athlete is to that kind of international standard that we're looking for. So this athlete, for example, here, really good counter movement jump, lower extremity power. On this day here, their yo-yo score was really, really low. The athlete in question actually got a really bad stitch and had to drop out. That's why the score was so low for them on that day, but they were kind of up to that higher standard, 19.1 beforehand. And their RSI was really good, up high, up at that international standard. And again, their 5:05 and their change of direction. The change of direction needs a bit of work, but their 5:05 was pretty good. That's kind of what it looks like for the male athletes. And then we have the same for our female athletes. So again, testing different days, whether the change was a positive change or a negative change, just so the coach can see. And then again, the female standards. Unfortunately for the females, we have far less data to take from in terms of from research and also from just what we have ourselves. So that probably will change over the next couple of years, because we have had more of the junior females coming through our doors and with data to collect from them, but that's kind of what it looks like report wise for the senior athletes. Okay, so loads of information there on kind of what is S&C, how, what understanding the demands of the sport, understanding the athletes that in front of you. So where do you start with, okay, in terms of if you're a coach and you now are about your badminton coach and you want to try and add in some S&C to your weekly planning. So you start with the basics. So same as badminton, you're going to learn the basic skills. So you're going to learn how to squat. So what a squat pattern is, what a hinge pattern is, what a push movement is, a pull movement is, rotation movements, carry movements, etc. So really simple movements, uncomplicated. All can be completely body weight to start with, and then you can easily start to progress with equipment you might already have to yourselves, like, you know, the big thick bands. You might have some med balls. You don't need to go kit yourselves out with you know, dumbbells and weights and all that at the start. You can really get a lot of work done with minimal equipment to start with. And then you're also going to look at your speed and your power and your plyometrics. So your landing abilities, jumping abilities, bouncing, repeat hopping, putting, turning, sprinting. So again, initially that the younger ages and any beginner, it's just creating a really solid foundation. And it absolutely does not have to be badminton specific to start with. How you would structure a session. So your warm-up. So to start with, your warm-up could be exactly what you're doing on the badminton court. You don't need to do anything different. I would then move into something that we call a primer. So that's kind of bridging the gap from the warm-up to what a main session looks like. So preparing the body for what is to come. So maybe on this day, you're going to do some squatting, you're going to do some plyometrics, and you're going to do some upper body work of pushing and pulling. So you might do a couple of exercises that get the body ready for what's going to happen in what comes next, will be the main session. So the main kind of lifting part of the session as such. And then you're moving into your cool down and your recovery. So your stretching, your hydration, your nutrition, your mobility, and all those elements. So I've included here like an example of what you could do for your main part of your session. So a body weight circuit with a youth athlete with zero equipment in 10 minutes at the end of a gym session, or sorry, a court session. So you could set up a couple of stations and athletes are rotating around these stations. So they might do 10 body weight squats. Then they move on straight away. They go in and do 10 shoulder tap exercises. So in a push-up position, just alternating right and left with their shoulder taps. Then moving on to the next station, doing a bit of single leg stability. So maybe something like a single leg deadlift. Then moving on to the next kind of area, and they might do double leg hop and stick drill. So again, working on stability, double leg. Then moving on to the next station, you know, 10 walking lunges or so. And then the next station, maybe a bit of a core exercise, a side plank, 15 seconds each side. And then moving on to finish with a skater hop and stick. So that's like side to side, hop and stick, single leg stability. They might complete 2 to 3 sets of that. So something, again, you could get done easily 10, 15 minutes at the end of a session to start off with. That's with absolutely no equipment. Okay, you could do that for a couple of weeks. And then if you wanted to progress it on, if you had something like the large power bands available, you could move on to something like this. So a banded squat, an elevated push-up, a banded single leg deadlift, still your double leg hop and stick, maybe a banded split squat, maybe a banded row, a side plank, and a skater hop and stick. Again, very simple, very straightforward, but very effective with somebody who has just started off, or somebody like who's a little bit more senior and you just want to do some injury prevention type work. Perfect kind of content there for them. And then I suppose, okay, you've gone through that stage and now you've got somebody who wants to start off with loading a bit more with dumbbells. And this is kind of how I would talk about loading for beginners and what to do with them. So I'd start with, you know, 3 to 5 sets, depending on how many exercises you're going to include, of 5 to 8 reps at a very easy load. So RP there, it means your rate of perceived exertion. So that should be a 4 to 5 out of 10. So again, they should be finishing this like well able to do another set or two easily of it to start with. So you go through a session easily like that, and then you think of moving on. Okay, the following week I'm going to add a bit of load. So we've done body weight, and now we're going to move to, okay, I'm going to start with 2 5 kilo dumbbells here. And then you keep doing that until you get to a point where they're thinking, okay, that's about a 7 to 8 out of 10. So maybe week 1, they use 5 kilo dumbbells. Week 2, they might use 7.5s. Week 3, they're at 10s. And they're like, okay, yeah, actually, that's a little bit tough now. I'm kind of feeling that in the legs. I might be a little bit sore the next day. That's kind of where they're at for that. And then we can look at just maybe increasing it ever so slightly the following session. So maybe after 2 weeks, increasing that to maybe 12.5 kilo dumbbells instead, where they're still at that kind of RP of 7 to 8, but it's a moderate difficulty that they still will be able to do in their set if you ask them to. Then they'd move towards kind of your basic periodization, which I'll talk about. Ideally, you're going to aim for like 2 sessions a week of this. Again, if you're kind of only doing one, what you generally tend to find is athletes will do it 1 week, and then by the time they come around and they're a bit sore and stiff and, you know, they mightn't be that happy with it, and then you come around to the following week and it's just kind of the same thing happens again. Whereas at least if you're able to do it, like say on a Tuesday and a Thursday, or a Tuesday and a Friday, there isn't that big gap happening between each session. So ideally 2 times a week. Keep it simple, focus on the basics, and again, it's technical ability first, not strength or power based. Okay, and then you've gone through that, you've gone through a couple of weeks or even a couple of months of that kind of work, or a year even of that kind of work with maybe, you know, your 14, 15-year-olds, and now you're kind of moving into, okay, well, what does kind of periodization look like? So for 4 weeks, this is something that you could kind of work towards with somebody. So week 1, they might do 3 sets of 8 reps at about 70% of the 1 rep max. Again, you don't have to go testing 1 rep max, but they should have an idea of that's hard. Okay, they've an RP of maybe 7 or 8. They might be able to do 2 more sets at that weight, but definitely no more, or even only 1 more set. And the following week, you might add another set on, reduce the reps down, but increase the weight ever so slightly. And then week 3, you're kind of doing the same. They might, you know, do the same sets, but bring the reps down to 4, but again, increase the weight ever so slightly. And then week 4, we're dropping everything down a lot to recover. So they're coming back down to 3 sets of 6 reps. The RP is dropped down to 4, so really easy. They should be able to do 4 or 5, 6 sets at this weight. And it's just allowed them to recover before they start another program again and they're into something newer. So that's kind of, I know it's kind of rushed through that, but again, take your time afterwards when Craig sends you out the notes, and just have a flick through of kind of what you kind of understand of that, of how you can progress load for an athlete. Okay, if we talk about kind of lower body strength exercises and how we split them up and what they look like. So we'd have our squat patterns. So that's more of your knee dominant work. So you could have a goblet squat, a front squat, a back squat. We have a hinge movement. So that's primarily hip dominant movements. So we've got deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, trap bar deadlifts, good mornings. We've got lunge patterns then. So split squat, forward, reverse. And then we have our single leg knee dominant exercises. So a rear foot elevated split squat, a single leg squat, a step up, or maybe a single leg press. And then we've single leg hip dominant exercises. So a single leg deadlift or a reaching lunge. So that's kind of how lower body strength is, you know, split up. And then how I go about programming it, you don't always have to do this, but how I go about programming it is one day I will pick that they do a squat pattern exercise and a single leg hip dominant exercise. So a front squat and a single leg deadlift on Tuesday. And then on Friday, they do a double leg hinge pattern. So a deadlift or a trap bar deadlift, and a single leg knee dominant exercise. So maybe a single leg squat or a step up exercise. And that's generally how I program. And I know by doing it that way, I'm ticking all boxes. I've got hip dominant, I've got knee dominant, I've got single leg, hip and knee dominant, all covered within the 1 session or the 1 week. And then if you look at the upper body strength, how to split that up. So you've got horizontal push, vertical push, horizontal pull, vertical pull. So again, horizontal push, there are push-ups, your bench press. The horizontal pull, pulling yourself in towards yourself, so any kind of rowing exercises. And then your vertical push will be anything that you're going to go overhead with, your overhead press or a landmine press, and vertical pull, a lat pull or a chin up or a pull up, for example. So again, how I split that up during the week, on a Tuesday, they do their horizontal push and pull, and on a Friday, they do their vertical push and pull. And that's a very easy way of me ticking things off. in between that, then they get their core exercises. And I start always with some plyometric work for everybody. So it's a very simple way of making sure you kind of tick off everything for each exercise. Then power development. So what we do for power development, so as I mentioned, everybody does some plyometric work. Volume switches up depending on what's been happening on court and competitions. Majority of the senior athletes now do a lot of Olympic weightlifting derivatives. Nearly all of them would do a power clean. Some of them do power snatches and dumbbell snatches. And then all of them at some point in the year will be doing med ball exercises. And for junior athletes, med ball exercises are some of the best exercises that you can get done. Really useful piece of equipment, cheap and cheerful enough for a club to be buying a couple of different weights, 3, 4, 5, 6 kilo dumbbells, or sorry, med balls, and you can get a huge volume of work done with them. So again, that's just kind of how we'd work on their power. So I just thought I'd show you kind of what 2 different senior athletes programs look like in the last month or so. So on the left, the athlete here is has got a little bit of a hamstring issue that's been ongoing for a while. So up here, they start with their plyometrics and power development. Before they've done this, they've done their warm-up and their primer, which includes some calf rehab and their plyometric work. And then here they move into kind of their primary strength work. So we've got, again, I've just broken them up for here: squat, which is knee dominant, a bench press, which is horizontal push, an RDL, which is hip dominant, and a single leg dumbbell row, which is a horizontal pull exercise. And then here we go into what their accessories or their work-ons are. And again, as I mentioned, this athlete is more so working on a bit of hamstring work. So we've got 2 hamstring exercises in there, and we've got a little bit of shoulder health and some core work for them to finish with. Over here, we've got the number of sets that they do, followed by the number of reps. So this athlete does 4 sets of 4 in their back squat, and down here they do 3 sets of 6 on each side on the single arm row. The athlete here on the right, then, by comparison, this athlete has a bit of a niggly knee that we've been looking after. So this athlete, same kind of idea: Olympic weightlifting for their plyometrics and power development. Then moving into their strength work, so really heavy concentric squats. Again, that helps their knee. Their knee responds quite well to that. Again, horizontal push and pull in, some hip dominant work with the RDL. And then down here, they just do a little bit of single leg press for that knee, and then some of their core work and a little bit of shoulder health to finish with. And this athlete needs to be reminded to do their thoracic mobility work, so it's in on their program for them to do at the end before they leave. That's kind of what the programming looks like for your senior athletes. Thought I'd finish with just chatting a little bit about plyometrics before we move on to kind of some questions that you probably have. So plyometrics, I think, are brilliant exercises to include, and what's brilliant about them, they can be done kind of anywhere. So you can do them on court at the end of a session or at the beginning of a session, and you only need kind of 10 minutes to actually get some really quality work done for your plyometrics. And I'm just going to chat through kind of how you would progress them through from a junior kind of up to a senior and what it looks like. So what are plyometrics? So it's utilizing what we call the stretch shortening cycle. So the stretch shortening cycle is where the tissue lengthens and then rapidly shortens. So any of your change of direction movements happen in badminton all the time, in any speed, sprinting to the forward, of course, and stopping and going again is all going to be a plyometric activity. So what we start with is like your landing mechanics. So teaching a player how to land really softly, and then looking to progress it towards being much stiffer and producing much higher forces. I mentioned at the start that we do test an athlete's reactive strength. So again, this is testing their plyometric ability. So we talk about this as the athlete's explosiveness, but what we do is measure an athlete's height that they jump and divide it by the contact time that they spend on the ground. So a way of getting an athlete increasing their RSI score, getting to spend less time on the ground, so being really fast, or else jumping much higher, or a combination of both. So I just want to just explain what reactive strength is. So the way we test it, we get them to do 10 hops in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we take the average of their best 5. That's kind of what the reactive strength is. Okay. But what the main goal to start with is looking at like force acceptance. So what we have is looking at athletes, can they dissipate the forces when they land? So when they land, do they land with a nice flat foot? Are they able to spread that force up through their hip, knee, and ankle? Are they being nice and quiet with it? Are they thudding and hitting the ground really hard? The cues that we use are, okay, like a ninja, I don't want to hear you. Be like a sponge, absorb the force. And they all get it quite quickly. So what we do is we look at hop and stick drills. So as I mentioned before, like a double leg hop and stick. So starting off on 2 legs, jump and stick, landing on 2 legs. And then I'll chat through how we now progress that onwards. But this is just detailing, I suppose, how you can put it into your training session very easy. So 2 days a week for 8 to 10 weeks is kind of the ideal way of doing it. And then you can move away and not include it anymore and then come back to it. The emphasis should be on correct technique. So ideally non-fatigued. So ideally you might take them through their warm-up and then head into doing some plyometric work. So in a 10-week program, in week 1, you're looking to 50 to 60 jumps in the first week and then progressing to 90 to 100 jumps by the end of week 10. So again, really quickly that you can get it done, and just make sure that they are wearing appropriate footwear to start with and that they are landing on a nice surface. So badminton mats are a perfect one, or a spring floor is a perfect surface compared to maybe doing it outside on a tarmac floor wouldn't be ideal. And this is just how you would go about progressing it through those jumps. So week 1, you're starting off double leg hop and stick, maybe doing that for 2 to 3 weeks. Then moving on to single leg hop and stick. Then moving on to double leg continuous, so thinking skipping, hopping movements. Then moving on to doing that continuously, so single leg continuously. If you have equipment like little hurdles or ladders, again, you could have them hopping through the ladders or hopping over cones, for example. And then the way we progress it even more then is to start increasing the height. So going on to box jumps or landing off boxes if you have them available to you, or benches that might be sitting at the side of the court. That's kind of how you would simply progress it through. And I've just included a sample program for a beginner that you might start with for 50 to 60 contacts. Again, you can see how easy it is with 3 exercises there, 2 sets of it. If you've 20 players, you can split them into 2 groups and get that work done in 10 minutes. And then again, just at the bottom is how you might progress that weeks 4, 5, and 6, for example. Just moving to your single leg work and then more of your continuous work, throwing in like changing direction, zigzag movements, 90-degree turns. You can move to 180-degree turns. You can be quite inventive with it and have a lot of fun with it. So that's kind of just some plyometric work that you could progress. Finally then, and we'll finish up with some questions. I'm sorry if I've rushed through that, but there was kind of a good bit I wanted to cover for you. Some of the lessons, I suppose, that I've learned over the last 2 Olympic cycles. So in for the Tokyo cycle, we didn't have any of our pathway players coming in. And in the last 2 years, I suppose, we've had some of our junior players starting to come into the institute. And I have to say the difference I can see in the development of those players now who are getting S&C at school age is just huge, because not the problem is, but an issue that I suppose I have with the senior players is that once they start traveling the circuit and once they are going out there, it's a lot harder to try and make physical gains that you want to make. A lot of the time it comes down to more injury prevention and trying to keep them healthy and keep them in one piece, as opposed to making them stronger, fitter, faster, for example. Whereas with the juniors now at the moment, Johnny is in a lovely position where he's able to work on all these capacities, make them stronger. We can see improvements month by month with those junior players, that hopefully then when they get into the senior circuit, they're in an even better place and a better starting point than our current senior players, which is really exciting for badminton. A bit annoying for maybe some of the senior players who are there at the moment, but personally, I just think it's brilliant. It's fantastic to see them in and making such gains. Secondly, I think is just I've learned that we need to look at everything surrounding the player. So you can very easily get stuck in just looking at, okay, this is my plan for the player. This is what I want them to be doing. La la la. But they're human at the end of the day. They have life things going on, family issues, work commitments. Some of the junior players might want to be playing another sport. They might be great at their nutrition through education or just not wanting to engage with it. Hydration, all those elements are hugely, vitally important to the players. So getting to a nice place with each player where they're confident to come and talk to you. Oh, look, I've had a really rough day. I've had a huge fight with my boyfriend. I'm just in a really bad mood. I just am in the mood today. Can I just go a bit lighter? And just taking them for face value has been hugely beneficial for me with kind of getting a really good relationship with them, where I feel they can all talk to me and let me know things that might be bugging them, or blow off a bit of steam when they come into the gym. Then it's something it's brilliant in terms of even just getting a bit further with them. Never underestimate the value of rest and recovery. So senior players don't particularly like rest and or recovery. Well, they like the recovery part. They don't technically like the rest part. But if you can educate the younger players on the importance of it, it makes it a lot easier when you get to the senior levels of them understanding and accepting it. Train. That's what most youngsters want to do. But if you can actually get them to step back and rest and fully recover, the seniors, the way they generally work is, they train Monday to Friday and then they're off Saturday, Sunday, and they come back in. But often they might have a league match at the weekend that they're traveling abroad for. So they might train Monday to Friday. They go and play a league match on a Saturday. They travel home Sunday and they're back in on Monday and they're tired and they're wrecked. So, just chatting with them, the coaches are well educated themselves. They know, okay, well, Monday needs to be a really light day, or you know what, actually, let's leave Monday and let's start again on Tuesday. Just again, education on that. And if you're lucky enough, just always work closely with those people that are around you. So I'm lucky enough that I have a fantastic relationship with Sam and Iskander, very open and honest with each other. We work really well as a team. I think anyway. I'm lucky enough then as well. I work with the nutritionists, psychologists, performance directors, physiologists, physiotherapists, doctors. I have a huge team around me that I can lean on and I can look to for support. So if an athlete says to me, oh, my wrist is bugging me, it's really sore, I'm in a lovely position that I can straight away walk down the hall and I can say to the physio, here, X has just said her wrist is really at her, could you have a quick look? Or I can drop an email to the nutritionist saying, oh, hey, look, I was chatting to X during the week and she said that she's not taking on any fuel during her matches. They're going on for over an hour. Can you have a catch up with her? But just if you have people that are around you that you can work with, to do that. And if not, maybe look at directing people towards externals who they might be able to get some information from. And I know Craig has had like a load of people involved here that can help hopefully educate you guys in a little bit more areas, nutrition, psychology, and things like that. But they're kind of my main key points that I've learned, I suppose, over the last number of years with those that I've been working with. So I'm happy to take any questions that might be there.
Thanks, Claire. Really interesting. Lots of really useful stuff I think the guys on the call can use in their club and with their players. And as you said, like you've such a great team around you, and there's lots of stuff that the guys here can do in their club or in their own setting with their players that don't involve, as you mentioned, buying a lot of equipment. So what kind of exercises would you recommend for the really youngsters? Would you recommend they do anything? And if so, what would that be? And I'm talking under 13 age, the really youngsters.
Yeah. Yeah, those under 13, under 14. So what I'd be looking at is just getting them to understand like appropriate movement. So, and what's a proper squat pattern look like? You know, cueing, bum back, knees out, chest up. What does a proper hinge movement look like? You know, shoulders down and back, keeping their back nice and flat, hinging forward, pushing their hips back. What does a proper split squat or a lunge movement look like? Introducing simple basic core. So can they hold a front plank properly, a side plank, and then introducing those basic plyometric exercises. So your hop and stick drills, learning to absorb force, and then just gradually progressing it through. So nothing that's, you know, you need a degree of any description, but just making sure they're doing the movements correctly and efficiently is the main thing.
I just stopped the share in there to bring us up for
like,
everyone. So we have also then we have a couple of questions. If you guys, if you have any questions, we do have time for a few if you want to pop them in the chat. For myself, I can direct them towards Claire. Just one, you were mentioning recovery at the end, Claire. Carol from the chat has a question, and what exactly should they do for that? I know myself, I foam roll, but the guys are more advanced. They're maybe doing ice baths and these kind of things as well. But what would you particularly recommend? And is it different for, I guess, different people?
Yeah, like different people have kind of different things that they like to do or not like to do. But, you know, rest and recovery for me, for the senior athletes at the moment, is literally resting and recovering. So having a Netflix day and sitting down. Now, I'm talking about people who are on the go, you know, 6 days a week. But within that, you know, they have areas that they need to be working on. So are they doing their stretching? Are they doing their mobility? Are they refueling properly? So are they, you know, because some people think rest, oh, I'm not training, I don't need to be fueling, but actually that's a day of getting ahead of yourself. So, you know, a Sunday is actually a big day for them to fuel up properly so they're ready for a Monday. So that's recovery. What's their hydration like? Are they maybe doing some meditation? Are they doing maybe, you know, 20 minutes of yoga? Something like that, they like. Some of them do ice baths. Some of them do some saunas, you know, short saunas to feel good. Some of them get out and just go for a 30-40 minute walk, easy walk to refresh their brain and everything else. So it kind of does like look like different things for different people. But I think the big thing is rest. It has to be rest. Like a travel day isn't rest. Travel for everybody is stressful and tough and hard. So as much as they can, that resting, sitting down, watching Netflix, going for a coffee with a friend, those sort of things are really important. Yeah.
Thanks, Carol. Carol asked that one. Another one from Kevin then. So if 2 sessions of S&C is a good goal, how many cardio or high intensity interval training sessions would you aim for in the week?
That's a tough one to answer because it does depend big time on what's happening on court. You know, if you're doing a lot of high intensity training on court, you don't want to top that up with anything extra. For example, the seniors, when they're kind of in a training block, some of them do running on the track, and the coaches write that program, and they would do that just once a week as an additional session, for example. Then we do have, I would program bike sessions for 2 of the athletes who just don't really tolerate running very well. One being the Achilles athlete, and one being that has like an ongoing hip problem. So one athlete, for example, is doing 3 bike sessions a week at the moment because they're not tolerating a whole lot of work on court. They're getting 2 interval sessions and 1 kind of aerobic session on a bike. And then another athlete with the Achilles is doing 1 interval session on a bike a week. So it's a hard one to answer, but depends on the athlete, depends on the phase of training. But just do be careful that just to look at like, okay, what does the whole week look like? You don't want to do like a high intensity court session, the following day a high intensity running session, the following day you're back on court and it's another high intensity court session and then you're going for a running session the next day, like that's far too much load for your nervous system to take on board. So you want it to maybe be a heavy day, a light day, a heavy day, a light day, maybe a heavy day, and then resting for the weekend. So looking at what you're doing across the whole week is more important than what you can fit in terms of that high intensity training. Sorry,
Great.
it's hard to
Great.
answer.
Good question. Yeah, good question. And
Yeah,
it's circumstantial, I guess.
yeah.
So Carol actually asked a question because she had a misdiagnosed grade 3 tear in her calf, and it took 6 months kind of before she was, and then it ended up being grade 4. Had surgery. She's doing physiotherapy since January, so she's looking for exercise that'll help strengthen her, I guess, and get her back playing.
Yeah, like getting her calf strength back up, introducing when appropriate those plyometric exercises, the hop and stick. And she can do like, your off court work. So if she has access to a bike, a ski erg, a rowing machine, things like that, where she's not actually loading the calf to help get her back. And then when appropriate, getting back on court and running or whatever is appropriate. But yeah, that's a tough injury to have dealt with, unfortunately.
Another one from Gozia here. She's asking, how many sessions would you recommend for children under 14 in the week if they're involved in different sports activities, not just badminton?
Yeah, tough one again to get a handle on exactly what's happening, but ideally they're doing at least one S&C session a week. They could be doing two, for example, on one day with you, they could be doing, that 10 minutes of plyometric work at the beginning of a session, and then another day with you or with another sport, they're doing their gym work. So again, as I said, with that age group, like you can get so much done in 20, 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be these big standalone sessions where you're getting really high volume, heavy load work done. You can get loads done in a short amount of time. So just being clever with the time available to the athlete involved, but ideally at least one S&C session a week, if not kind of 1.5 to 2, depending on what's happening in the other sports. So if they're doing S&C in the other sports, that hopefully you'll be able to go and have a chat with that coach of the other sport and say to them, okay, here, look, what are you covering? Oh, you're covering all the movement work. Perfect. You know what? I'm just going to cover plyometrics with them then twice a week at the beginning of a training session. So being clever about it and just making sure you communicate with as many people as possible, I think is vitally important there.
Yeah, Claire said that you're in a good position with our athletes, everything they're doing off the court and
Yeah.
what else they're doing. So I guess that's what you're referring to when you mean what else they're doing, because they might be doing an S&C session with their football and you're not aware
Yeah.
of that, and then you're doing extra
And to
on top
be
of that.
really clear when you're asking them. So, like you could say to a player, like one of those younger players, oh, what are you doing? Oh, well, I play football twice a week. Okay, and are you doing anything else? Are you doing gym work? No, 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 no. And then a couple of weeks later, you might end up talking to their parent. Oh, yeah, they're going down to the gym every Wednesday evening with their pals to do X, Y, and Z. And then you're like, oh, God, right now we've loaded up. So as much as getting as much information as you can as to what's happening in the person's life in sport and what they're doing in their free time as well, especially young lads when they start getting to 16, 17, 18. I have a nephew who every twice a week he goes down to the local gym with his pals, and he mightn't be classifying that as, sport or whatever, but like that's work for him and that he's doing. So it's, keeping on tabs of all the little extras that are happening.
I have another question just to throw in there
Sure.
because we have had a few, and another one. I know, obviously, Claire, if the guys in the chat don't know, works with Nas, who's currently trying to qualify for Paris, and then Josh and Paul in doubles. They're a doubles pair. So how do you differentiate the exercises between singles focus and doubles focus? Obviously, the discipline's been very different. What's the
Yeah.
difference in essence, in terms of S&C exercises for those?
Not a huge difference in terms of like exercise selection. So we'll cover all the bases, but I suppose Nat or Rachel, for example, like they would be covering obviously much more court. So it's just making sure that like on a long reaching lunge where they have to really throw themselves forward, that they kind of have the tissue strength and that like lengthened position is there. Whereas For the doubles pair, it's kind of more of that like squat position. Are they really sturdy in that position? You know, like the fast reactive work
Mm,
that's happening maybe at the net, or whoever's doing kind of maybe doing more of the smashing work at the back of the court, like that their shoulder health and their thoracic mobility is really good.
mm,
There's not a huge difference in terms of like gym prescription of what's going on, but it's just maybe like more like their movement efficiency and what they're tolerating might be a little bit different. And then from the conditioning end of things, it's a bit different. So, Nat, for example, he loves long matches that go on for an hour and a half, and he loves like breaking players down and like playing those big games. Whereas the boys, they're not. They're done and dusted 40 minutes kind of, and
mm.
so their conditioning end of things does look quite different. But from a gym perspective, it's not hugely different with them, which is great in terms of like if you're dealing with junior players, if they're a singles player versus a doubles player, if they're looking at being one versus the other, you don't have to be hugely different in what you're doing with them, which is nice. Yeah.
Thanks. That's a
No
very
problem.
badminton specific question for you, but you're basically an
Yeah,
expert on
yeah.
badminton these days.
I don't know. I definitely didn't know a whole lot when I started with them, but you learn a lot from the players, and I watch as much as I can now, and it's brilliant. The live streams are available for nearly every tournament that they go to, so you do
Yeah.
get to be able to watch them, and then it's great. Very quickly, you can have a chat with the coach, and Sam and Iskander, the coaches, they're
Mhm.
always coming into the gym. They come in every single week, if not twice a week. So we have a brilliant relationship of, hey, this is really good. Oh my God, can I, or me not knowing, here, can I ask you, what was the story with X going on with Rachel in that match?
Mm.
Can we work on that? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and work with it. So I'm lucky in that sense.
Yeah, I guess with the streaming, it's very useful for you to look if they're struggling with a movement pattern or a strength in a
Yeah,
movement pattern, and you can adapt their program then, I guess, to fit that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna probably wrap up a little bit early, but I'd like to thank Dr. Claire Brady for joining us. And it's been really informative, and thanks for rescheduling and jumping on this evening with us.
Sorry again.
No problem. We will send the slides on to everyone on a PDF, so you have them. And we look forward to seeing everyone in the next one, which is in April, where we're going to be joined by Dr. Catherine Norton from University of Limerick, who's a expert in nutrition. So she's going to be telling us all what we should and shouldn't be eating. All right. So thanks again, Claire,
Thanks a million.
and
Thank you.
good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.